Bloober Team, I might owe you an apology.
I'm not your Mary.
The Silent Hill 2 remake blew my expectations out of the water with such velocity that I'm still expecting to wake up from a restless dream, and none of this was actually ever real. In my opinion, it succeeds at almost everything it tries to accomplish and has allowed the majority of the fanbase, myself included, to be able to finally exhale after over a decade of held breath. It certainly isn't a perfect game, and it does have its share of flaws, which we will go over in this series, but no one could have predicted Bloober Team outdoing themselves like this and resuscitating this legendary survival horror franchise so spectacularly. Well, let's get tucked in then, shall we? Because I want this video series to be my comprehensive run-through of the game and all the little things like Easter eggs and stuff that I noticed. And I think we've all had enough time to beat it by now, but just in case, here is the spoiler warning. If you don't want to be spoiled, then click off now. Spoiler warning. Spoiler warning. Spoiler warning. Silent Hill 2 has one of, if not the most depressingly important stories told in a video game. It's also, in my biased opinion, the greatest story ever told in any video game. It fears not to tackle some of the human mind's darkest corners, delving into shame, regret, anxiety, anger, depression, assault, and bloody murder. But it didn't just use all these shocking themes as gimmicks to, well, shock you. It intellectually wove them into a mysterious story that you couldn't not want to solve. Even if the game had you borderline fighting off panic attacks through its oppressive atmosphere and bizarre encounters. The emotions that it brought out of me when I was just 11 years old were, in no corny way, life-changing for me. You play as James Sunderland, an average Joe Schmo kind of guy, who gets a letter from his deceased wife to meet her again in their special place in the town of Silent Hill. This is such a great intro to a horror game, not because it's something so profound or anything, but it instantly gives you the main goal of the game and the first of its many mysteries. It doesn't need to drone on with some big exposition dump, it's straight to the point. It also paints the main character James as somewhat heroic and unwaveringly loyal to his lost love. That even if there was no realistic chance that his dead wife could have written him a letter, he would do anything, even if it seems impossible to be true, just in the hopes to see her again. Of course, we learn later on that this very theme flips on its head and shines this whole intro in a different and much darker spotlight.
Well, I'm alone there now, in our special place, waiting for you.
I got a letter. The name on the envelope said Mary. My wife's name. It's ridiculous. Couldn't possibly be true. That's what I keep telling myself. Mary died of that damn disease 3 years ago. So then why am I looking for her? Our special place. What could she mean? This whole town was our special place. Could Mary really be here? Is she really alive? Waiting for me?
Immediately, you notice something is kind of off with our boy. If it wasn't James's pulsating hands in the bathroom, it's just the sheer atmosphere. It's incredibly isolating, there's a tenseness lingering in the air. But there's no time to waste. Your wife is waiting for you out there somewhere, and she's got some beyond the grave pen pal explaining to do. You grab the map from the car that you've parked terribly and left open, and oh look, Bloober added physics to the car door. You can actually close it now, that's kind of neat. And what's this? When you break the camera and look into the back seat, they actually added it. Oh my god. But we'll come back to that later. Anyway, it's off to see the wizard. And this is how the game sets off, a long, lonely stroll into town with nothing but the ambience of Foley art and the not-so-distant terrors to accompany you. James seems laser-focused on his task though, and doesn't stop to question why there's seemingly no one around or what the hell those noises in the woods could be. This was something I actually feared going into a remake in the modern day. Protagonists of modern games natter away to themselves so much that, like, 1, it's unrealistic for anyone who isn't mentally ill to speak to themselves out loud so much, and 2, it's really annoying, and 3, immersion breaking or whatever. But on this little woodland walkie is also where we get to see the fancy new fog tech that Bloober are using, and holy shit does it look amazing. It's so thick, and it believably floats through the space ahead of James, obscuring the horizon line, but invites the players to push forward and explore. Very tasty stuff. And this is the first of many save points in the game. They are these glowing, mysterious red squares. In the original game, when you interact with these, there was this creepy picture of James staring back at the player with this sort of gormless look on his face. In the remake, it's like the player is looking through a portal to see James in real time staring right back at us. It's kind of goofy, but at the same time, it's really kind of cool. We will delve into these a bit more later on, as right now, it's just a save point for all intents and purposes. After returning from the save screen, James remarks,
It's like someone's groping around my skull.
Curious, huh? On James's journey to find his wife in this progressively hellish waking nightmare, he meets a bunch of individuals who all seem to be going through something similarly wrapped in question marks. First one of those we run into is Angela Orozco.
Excuse me.
I'm sorry. I was just...
Hey, it's okay. I didn't mean to scare you. I'm kind of lost.
Lost?
A troubled and shy young woman who tells us the way to get into town from the cemetery. She also warns us that there's something wrong with the town.
I think you should stay away. This town, there's something wrong with it. And it's not just the fog, either.
Is it dangerous?
Maybe. It's kind of hard to explain, but...
It does seem a little irresponsibly vague not to explicitly mention that the town is filled with demonic manifestations of one's own psyche, but we'll let her off because she's clearly got enough on her plate, bless her. She also mentions she's looking for her mother. Also, her father and her brother might be knocking about too. We eventually do find out, of course, that Angela's past was extremely volatile. She suffered sexual abuse from her father and her brother, and when she turned to her mother for help, her mother gaslit her into thinking it was all her fault, which even Angela started to believe. Eventually, one fateful night, Angela stabbed her father and brother to death in self-defense, and still clutching the kitchen knife she used to take their lives, she turns up at Silent Hill for reasons unknown. Angela is by far the most tragic tale told in Silent Hill 2, and Bloober Team have added a lot of extra details that the original game couldn't. If we zoom in on Angela's fingernails, you can see that she's bitten them to shit. A common self-soothing habit or coping strategy for those who suffer intense emotional stress. It's a physical outlet for the inner pain. This is a very nice detail, and it can only be observed when you break the game's camera and zoom in. Good job, Bloober. This is a good sign of things to come. James gives Angela the absolute Chad line.
I guess I don't really care if it's dangerous or not. I'm going either way.
Before we leave, a quick search of the graveyard, we can observe a freshly dug out grave. I wonder who this was for. James was washing his hands at the start of the game back in the bathroom. Did he dig this grave? Personally, I can't decide between the idea that he dug the grave for a certain someone, or the town itself created the grave for our boy James. The hand-washing scene could also be a Lady Macbeth type reference, where no amount of washing could rid the hands of guilt. Food for thought. But with that, we press on. Passing the good old Silent Hill Ranch. This place has become one of the game's most memed locations, as when Konami hired Hijinks Studios to make the HD collections of Silent Hill 2 and 3 way back in 2012, the poor guys were given broken and unfinished source code to the games they were supposed to remaster. Konami had just lost the final code. It wasn't an uncommon practice back then to misplace or delete the code to games that had already been printed and shipped, but this meant that the team at Hijinks had a shit ton of extra work to do to even get the games running properly. They had broken fog effects and unsynced audio, just to name a couple of the many issues they faced. But hilariously, they made the executive decision to change the Silent Hill Ranch font scene here to Comic Sans. the font that millennials used back in 2006 to try and seem edgy. What's great here though is that Bloober Team knew they had to somehow add this to the game, but without ruining the tone. So once again, if we break the camera here, we can see that inside this barn out of the player's sight, the Comic Sans sign lives on in 2024. Good job, Bloober. Grabbing the key from inside the auto shop gets us through the door blocking our path. We soon arrive at a familiar location. The game prompts a button press to give fans of the original game a glimpse of the past. This was where James would come across his first enemy encounter and acquire his first melee weapon. But here in the remake, we're blocked from entry but can hear disturbing guttural noises from within the darkness. I love these moments as a fan of the original, but I think first-time players might be a little confused as to what these actually mean. Just up ahead, we grab another map, and isn't it so nice to get a Silent Hill map in 4K, guys? Like, wow, I can actually read it without squinting. The map is so well implemented in this game. Just like the original, James jots down places of interest, locked doors, puzzle locations and the like automatically. It's become my favourite map in any game I think I've ever played. It's always really easy to read what's locked or where you need to go next. Coming across a raspberry smear in the road, it leads us to spot this pissed up nutter stumbling through the street away from us into the fog. This will be the first time of many that just letting the sound design guide us, we know exactly where the game wants us to go. It's extremely well done and might possibly be the best use of 3D audio I've ever experienced in a horror game. Just listen to this.
Hello?
Following our ears, we find the iconic radio. This thing will snap, crackle and pop when enemies are nearby, and oh, speak of the devil. This disgusting monstrosity is known as the lying figure. Its design is symbolic of a hospital patient on their deathbed writhing in agony. Likely James's memory of Mary when she was in the worst of her illness, but infused with his internal suffering of having to deal with her. The artist Masahiro Ito, who designed all the enemies in the game, is into some freaky bondage shit. He regularly posts some pretty saucy drawings that he makes on his Twitter page, and I can't show them here for fear of the yellow dollar sign. James conveniently snaps off a piece of wood behind him with some nails poking out of it, and it makes a suitable bludgeoning instrument to beat this thing to death with. And here's the introduction to Bloober Team's effort to improve on the original combat that the 2001 Silent Hill 2 gave us. We know James is no action hero or trained assassin, but I wouldn't put it past him to have a career in baseball if he ever makes it out of Silent Hill, because he's got a fucking swing on him, ain't he? Armed with a 3-hit combo and an omnidirectional dodge, you'll have to recognize the enemy's tells and when you can commit to an attack if you want to avoid damage, especially on the harder difficulties. As we will come to realize though, the dodge kind of has iframes to it, but not consistently. It's kind of weird and kind of jank. Ironically, a bit like the original game in that way. The melee combat in this game, it certainly divides fans, but I actually quite like it. It's brutal, it's fierce, it keeps you thinking because the enemies counterattack you and don't just fall victim to endless hit stun. I think it gets the job done. I'm just glad we're not doing elaborate multi-hit combos and finishing moves because that certainly is tonally out of touch for Silent Hill, isn't it? I do kind of wish there was an ability to hold the attack button to wind up a heavy strike though. It's a simple mechanic, but it adds another tense dynamic to the fight without making James seem over-abled, which is very important to Silent Hill 2. It would also add an extra set of decisions to make during a battle. Do I have enough time to wind up this attack before the monster strikes first? Am I backed into a corner and I need one big strike to land to knock the enemy back so that I can run past and heal? And it also breaks up the monotony that comes from having just one way of attacking every enemy in the game with a melee weapon. After slaughtering that lying figure and having a little snoop around, we get introduced to the smashing glass mechanic. This will allow us to reach otherwise impossible to reach areas and locate hidden goodies like healing items and ammo. Making it back outside, we hear a voice come through the radio we just found. The voice is familiar. It's our ghostwriter Mary. She actually gives the entire plot of the game away here, just like she did in the original game, but for first-time players they have no idea what's going on, and it's just one of the many layers this game has and what makes it so replayable. So now that we have the radio and our first weapon, the world is our oyster. James comes across multiple dead and mangled bodies on his journey. The large majority of them are actually James's character model himself. You can easily miss this detail though because of the colouring and all of the viscera, but it's a very deliberate detail and one that foreshadows James's fate. But it also ties to a new theory that this remake has woven. Again though, more on that later when we get to it. The fog envelops the streets, obscuring just enough of the space ahead of James whilst also allowing us to marvel at the detail on all of the bespoke shops and buildings that Silent Hill has to offer. Honestly, this is kind of a dream come true for me as a fan. I always wanted to be able to go inside the stores and places in the original games, so it's fascinating to explore them this time around. And getting a glimpse of what Silent Hill might have been like as a small town with a tight-knit community. A far cry from what James is perceiving during his visit here though. Searching the various buildings, we find some nice Easter eggs, including a lager named after one of the main movies and Masahiro Ito's favourite movie that inspired Silent Hill in the first place. Jacob's Ladder 1990, with this Jacob's Lager that this local cafe is selling on tap. Although James sitting here for a beer would be kind of lore accurate, we can't pour ourselves a cold one because getting the coin out of the cash register triggers a line figure to just let itself in. I do really enjoy the goofiness of enemies using the doors like normal people would. They do it so nonchalantly too, like it's the most normal thing in the world. Murdering the Wrigley boy and making our way to the local hairdressers, there's a curious note that we can read inside. I saw him again, or at least I think so. He says he didn't, but I don't know anymore. I'm tired. Can't find it. Doesn't matter. That scraping noise again. This seems to have been written by someone who's witnessed the now series flagship monster, Pyramid Head, which is strange because only James should really be able to see him due to reasons that we'll get to. But does this mean that James wrote this note? But that's impossible because we're only just arriving here, right? Let's put that one on the back burner for now, but it ties to a theory I have later on. Something cool here though is the use of the scissors. See, in the original game, the rusted hulking blade that Pyramid Head scrapes along behind him was originally meant to be one arm of a giant dismantled pair of scissors. Eventually, much later on in the game when James gets his own great knife, it was supposed to be the other arm of that pair of scissors. So James and Pyramid Head would kind of be like Bezzy mates, who own two halves of the same giant pair of heart necklaces and put them together when they meet up for ultimate cringe. There's one main puzzle in this section of the game and it involves repairing a vinyl and the record player to play it. The first half of the record is found in the record player when you find it, but the second half of the record is in the Groovy Music Store. I mean, I guess if there was one place you're gonna look, right? The glue to stick the two halves together is right there next to it too. That's handy. Only one problem though. The jukebox is missing a button. Reading a nearby note tips us off that we need to hit the Soul Street apartments. Upon arriving, we hear the chimes jingling in the wind outside. And this is a nice piece of audio signposting for the player to guide them subtly to where the game wants you to go. In fact, most of the places, if not all of the ones that you need to visit in town, have something making a bit of noise outside to lure you in. Once we deal with the bug problem this place has, we get the key to the apartment 5 from behind reception. Exploring the bottom floor, we can observe a receipt in the Green's pharmacy. It lists a bunch of drug names which are all jumbled up. Thanks to a keen eye from Reddit user Overload0, they're actually jumbled up spellings of real-world drugs, ones that curiously treat anxiety and cancer. This obviously relates back to Mary's illness, and it's a pretty obscure and easy to miss detail here. Also note that the time on the clock on the wall is frozen. This specific time should be familiar to fans who played the clock puzzle in the original game. This time is significant because it's believed to be the exact time that Mary died. Spooky. Hitting the stairwell and making our way through the only available path, we reach apartment 5. And it's a shithole. But passing through a crack in the wall, we hear something from upstairs. Using the fire escape, we gain access to the apartment above, and this area is rather mysterious in itself. There's a cryptic letter that you can read when you first enter, but you can't make out much from it. But the bathroom is a nice callback to Silent Hill 4, The Room. The layout is just like Henry's bathroom, where a hole started forming on the wall, eventually getting big enough to climb through. Here though, it's just big enough for James to stick his arm into, which he's got no problem doing. It sounds sludgy and disgusting, but a fruitful endeavour as it contained the button for the jukebox. When we try to enter the room that the hole leads into though, it gives us this cutscene. Now, I believe this to be furthering the Silent Hill 4 reference. If you remember in Silent Hill 4, when the ghosts start to appear, they pull themselves through the walls and have this sort of stringy black tar-like substance that comes with them. So I think this black gloop on James's hand is the ghost juices from Silent Hill 4. Let me know what you think though, because I think this place is pretty interpretive. After we take the button back to the jukebox and play our mended record, James has a flashback to his trip to Silent Hill with Mary. You can actually see him well up in the eyes here, it's pretty emotional.
Park on the lake. We spent the whole day there. Just the two of us staring at the water.
Just as he's getting too sentimental, the machine breaks down and spits out a key. Of course, it's the key to get behind the bar and out into the back streets that follow. Eventually, we come to a blood-soaked pile of clothes, and examining it, we get the key to the Woodside Apartments, the first big dungeon of the game. Unfortunately for us though, the town doesn't seem very happy with us finding it, and the intensity dial gets cranked up as we need to hit the Shoelace Express, and quickly. Running through the streets with this increased wind effect and the fog looks so damn cool, accompanied by Akira Yamaoka's unique brand of industrial hellscape filling your ear holes, it's hard not to hold your breath as you jog to the Woodside Apartments as quickly as James feels like running, which isn't any faster than that run you do to cross a road when a car politely stops to let you and you want to show that you respect their time by not walking. Luckily, when we arrive, it's like coming out of a blizzard into a warm pub. Except this pub is damp, dimly lit, and houses all kinds of horrors. Horrors that we will get to in the next episode of this series. I really hope you enjoyed the journey so far. This game is so massive and there's so much to get through, so it makes sense to do it in like multiple videos. So make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss the uploads. Please hit the like button if you haven't already. Let me know in the comments if I've missed anything important, and until next time, I'll see ya when I'm looking at your phone.